Good day, everyone. Welcome to my lecture in ACC 221 Intermediate Accounting 3. I am your teacher, Jazelmay C. Del Monte, CPA. In this video, I will discuss the first part of share-based compensation. So let's get started. So let us define the share-based compensation plan. So what is a share-based compensation plan? It is a compensation arrangement established by the entity whereby the entity's employees shall receive shares of capital in exchange for their services, or the entity incurs liability to the employees in the amount based on the price of its shares. So there is another way to compensate our employees in exchange of their services, not just the regular salary or wages that we are giving to them, but also a compensation that is based or that is measured based on the shares of stocks. And those are equity settled and cash settled. So again, there are two kinds of share-based compensation plan. It could be an equity settled wherein they will be given an equity instrument, or the other one is a cash settled, which means that the entity or the employee will receive a cash or another asset in exchange of their services based on the prices of the company's shares. So PFRS 2, which deals with the share-based payment, sets out the measurement principles and specific requirements for accounting of the following share-based compensation. Again, there are two kinds of share-based compensation. First is the equity settled, which means the entity issues equity instrument in consideration for services received. For example of the equity instrument that is given to the employees in exchange of their services is the share option. The second type is the cash settled. Entities incur liability for services received, and the liability is based on the entity's equity instrument. For example, share appreciation rights. So in this topic, the share-based compensation, we will be dealing with the two kinds of equity instrument: share options and share appreciation rights. So in this video, we will be focusing on the first part, which is the share options. Now, what do you mean by share options? So share options, these are granted to officers and key employees to enable them to acquire shares of the entity during a specified period upon fulfillment of certain conditions at a specified price. So share options, this the equity instrument that is given to the officers and key employees are not directly shares of stock. Okay? So, hindi siya diretso bigyan sila at isyuhan sila ng shares of stocks. Instead, they will be given share options first. So, unsay nature sa share options? So, these options are rights, or these are the rights given to these employees that in the future they could be able to purchase. Okay, the employees were given the right or granted the right to purchase or acquire shares of the entity in the future. So kumbaga tagaan lang sila og right, so that in the future they could be able to purchase the shares of stocks of the entity. So dili pa siya directly nga shares of stocks ang ilahang ihatag, kundi right pa lang nga mupalit sila og shares in the future. So these options are conceived as additional compensation on the part of senior officers and other key employees. Now let's take note of this one, that in this share-based compensation, somehow usually these are only entitled to those with key functions in the entity, the so-called key employees and other officers. But for those na mga rank and files and medyo average level na mga employees, rare case lang nga ginatagaan sila og additional compensation on the basis of shares. So again, this share option is considered as an additional compensation for those senior officers and other key employees. So aside from their basic salary, they will be also be given an additional compensation based on shares. So before we proceed to the in-depth discussion about the share options, let us first define the important terms. Okay, so we have these terms such as grant date, measurement date, performance condition, vesting period, vesting condition, service condition, market condition, and the non-market condition. So let's start with the grant date. So what do you mean by grant date? So this is the date at which the entity and another party, including an employee, agree to a share-based payment arrangement. So both the entity and the receiver of the share-based payment agreed. Okay, so agreed that the entity, the first party, which is the entity, will give an option. Say for example, for the option to the other party, which includes the employee, being when the entity and the counterparty have a shared understanding of the terms and conditions of the arrangement. At the grant date also, the entity confers on the counterparty the right to receive cash or other assets or equity instrument of the entity, provided the specified vesting conditions, if any, are met. Usually, ang grant date, this is when this is when there is a meeting of minds between the two party, the entity and the receiver of the grant, kung kano sa mahatag, kano sa ma-entitle ang katong share-based compensation, provided that there are no specific vesting condition, meaning walay mga conditions, walay mga hindrances prior to the grant of those share-based compensation. If that agreement is subject to an approval process, the grant date is the date when that approval is obtained. Again, when there is no approval process, the grant date is specifically the date wherein the entity declares that the other party or the employees will receive some kind of share-based compensation. But if there is an approval process, please take note that the grant date is the date when the approval is obtained. Next is the measurement date. So the question is, when do we determine the particular measurement for our share-based compensation? Kanus aman, when will be our basis for the measurement of the share-based compensation? So it is said here that the date or the measurement date is this is the date at which the fair value of the equity instrument granted. Okay, so again, the measurement date, simply the measurement date is when the share-based compensation is granted. Okay, so again, measurement date is the grant date. For transactions with employees and other providing similar services, the measurement date is the grant date. So pag ang tagaan daw nato is mga employees and other personnel that provide similar services, the measurement date is the grant date. For transactions with parties other than the employees, the measurement date is the date the entity obtains the good or the counterparty renders the service. Examples of other parties. Say for example, you have your customers or suppliers. Okay, you have agreed that you will entitle them for a compensation ang inyong suppliers or customers. So kano sa man ang measurement date nato? So considered man sila as other parties, no? Parties other than employees. So ilang measurement date daw is the date when, or the measurement date is the date the entity obtains the good or the counterparty renders the service. So say for example, for supplier, kung gigranta nimo si supplier, the measurement date is when the supplier provides you the service or the goods. So performance condition. So as we've mentioned earlier on the grant date, if there's no conditions, okay, if walang vesting condition, then automatically the share-based compensation will be granted immediately to the employees. But somehow, if there is performance condition, so sama ng performance condition. So this is a vesting condition that requires first the counterparty to complete a specified period of service. So may mga conditions. Okay, we already understand what is condition, no? Pag may tag condition, something will not be possible or successful if these conditions are not met. So kailangan to siya nga mga conditions. So pag may tag mga performance condition, it is required, okay? It is required for the share-based compensation to be granted. So say for example, sa mga performance condition, it could be the counterparty to complete a specified period of service, or kumbaga, there must be a length of service na kailangan i-render prior to the granting of the share-based compensation, or the service requirement can be explicit or implicit. And the specified performance targets to be met while the counterparty is rendering the service required. So there is a performance target. Like say for example, not necessarily that you have completely rendered the services required. Kay tungod, there is a performance target. Kumbaga, say for example, nagbuhat lagi ka, pero wala man ka nakaabot sa threshold, wala man ka nakaabot sa standard. So, dili gyapon ka maka-receive ato nga share-based compensation. So, dili lang di ay ang performance of service ang condition, but also there is a specific performance target. Like say for example, dapat dapat 100% perfect ang imuhang na-perform. Okay? So, na-perform tuod nimo ang service, but wala man kakaabot sa 100% nga rating. So, dili gyapon ka maka-receive sa share-based compensation. So, that is performance condition. So, vest. What do you mean by vest? So, when say vest, this means to become an entitlement. So, simply, the employee or the other party is already given the title, or already granted. Okay? Granted na siya sa share-based payment. So, under a share-based payment arrangement, the counterparty's right to receive cash, other assets, or equity instruments of the entity vests when the counterparty's entitlement is no longer conditional on the satisfaction of any vesting condition. So, makaingon ta nga entitled na ang isa ka empleyado when there is no more conditions that were embedded on that share-based payment arrangement. So, kung na-satisfy na ang mga conditions, then automatically vested na ang payment. So, vesting period. So, what do you mean by vesting period? This is the period during which all the specified vesting conditions of a share-based payment arrangement are to be satisfied. So, kumbaga, this is the grace period prior to the vesting. Like, say, for example, this share-based payment shall be entitled to employees after 3 years of service. So, the vesting period there is 3 years. kay tsaka pa lang man siya i-vest when the 3 years has been satisfied. 3 years of service has been satisfied. So that is vesting period. So vesting condition, a vesting condition that determines whether the entity receives the services that entitle the counterparty to receive cash, other assets, or equity instruments of the entity under a share-based payment arrangement. So, same na gyapon, condition na gyapon siya. Service condition, so matutong this is another type of performance condition. Ang gina-require na condition is the service. Say for example, performance of service. Tsaka pa lang siya i-vest when you have already completed the service. So that is service condition. And of course, if you are not able to complete the service, then the vesting is pending, or maybe the vesting will not be or will not occur. Market condition. So what is this kind of condition? So this is a performance condition upon which the exercise price, vesting, or exercisability of an equity instrument depends that is related to the market price of the entity's equity instrument or the equity instruments of another entity in the same group. So simply stated that the vesting of such share-based payment agreement shall be based upon on the market condition. Say for example, the market prices of the entity's equity instrument. So if the entity surpasses the market condition, then we can say that we can vest the payment, the share-based payment to the employees. Another is non-market condition. So, ang performance condition or ang vesting karon will depend on some of the factors not related to the market prices. Examples, based on the growth in profit or earnings per share. Like say for example, if there is an increase in the profit of the entity, then the entity will receive this number of share options. So kumbaga, moto siya ang market condition. But if the entity will not surpass this percentage increase in the profit, then the employees will not receive share options. So mo na siya ang non-market condition. So examples of non-market conditions are based on the growth in the profit or the earnings per share. So those are the important terms that we need to understand, and we are going to account for the share options as a share-based payment. Okay, so let's have here the basic formula. So for share-based compensation, from the word itself, compensation. So how do we account the compensation? So for the compensation, once it is vested, such compensation will be recognized as an expense, but not to the extent that this compensation or the amount of compensation will be expensed immediately. Ano man, because those compensation will be distributed over the vesting period. Diba? We know already on sa tong vesting period, no? So, kato di ang salaries or the related compensation and the share-based will be deferred initially, and subsequently, this will be recognized as salaries expense over the vesting period. So, saan na to karon pag-determine sa salaries expense or the compensation to be recognized every year of the vesting period. So, say for example, if the vesting period is 3 years, so we will be dividing the share-based compensation into 3 periods. So, saan man nato siya? Now, share-based compensation under option shall be accounted currently and prospectively. So, in the future, or currently and in the future, if there are changes in the estimate, then kailangan nato siya i-adjust. Okay, kailangan nato i-adjust ang ato ang periodic expense. So, how to compute for the salaries expense during the year? So, let's start with year 1. So, of course, we will determine how many share options will be distributed. So, number of employees na entitled for the share-based, less any adjustment. So, sa man to mga ipang-deduct na to. If, for example, if na ay mga employees nga nihawa sa company, or there will be employees to be expected to leave in the future. So, kaon lang nato tong mga total employees entitled for the benefit. Multiply by the number of share options per employee. So, this will be the total options. Now, how do we measure the share options? Well, in our next slides, I think, it is said there that share options under a share-based compensation must be measured using the fair value. Fair value of the share options. When? Kanus ang fair value ato ang gamiton. That is the fair value of the share options at the grant date. Okay, so at the grant date. Now, if in case that the fair value is not available, then we will be using the intrinsic value. So again, basically, we are going to measure the share options on a share-based compensation using the fair value of the share options at the grant date. Okay, so maski pagtagaan mo dira og fair value of the options in so many dates, the most important there is the fair value of the options at the grant date. So, mo na inyong i-multiply sa total share options. Now, if in case that the fair value of the options is not available, then the intrinsic value will be used. Intrinsic value, dili lang kay isa ka intrinsic value na gamiton. We'll be using many intrinsic value depende sa period. Okay, later on, we will going to show to you how to use intrinsic value. So, after that, i-multiply lang siya to get the total value of the compensation. Again, as I've mentioned, if there is a vesting period, if the share-based compensation is not entitled immediately or if not granted immediately, then what will happen? The total value of compensation shall be deferred and subsequently amortized based on the vesting period. So, say for example, kani siya, on the first year, since this is the first year, i-divide lang nato siya by 3 to get the year 1 compensation. So, times 1/3. Okay, 3 years man siya, no? So, after that, we are getting already the cumulative salaries expense. So, ang kwaon nato is ang cumulative salaries. Okay? So, 1/3 siya, no? So, 1/3 of the total compensation, that is the first year's cumulative salaries expense. So, meaning, when you say cumulative, this covers already the current plus the previous na mga salaries expense. And since this is the first year yet, so, kaning cumulative salaries expense nato only includes the year 1 na compensation. So, from this cumulative salaries expense, i-minus lang nato ang cumulative compensation in the previous year. That will be the salaries expense during the current year. So, in the year 2, the same process, no, on how to identify the total number of employees entitled for the benefit times the share options per employee. So, we can have the total share options times the fair value of the options to get the total value of the compensation. Now, there are times that the total value of compensation on year 1 and year 2 may differ. For what reason? Maybe that is because of the number of employees na entitled. Nag-differ siya. Kay, di ba, ang number of employees nato is estimate lang man siya, especially if we estimate how many employees will be expected to leave. Okay? So, mo na siya, mag-differ na siya diri. Pero kung walay changes sa number of employees and the number of options to be received per employee, then most probably the total value of the compensation will be the same from time to time. So, mana siya timan-an ninyo ha, na possibility na dili sila parehas diri. So, after getting the total value of compensation, we'll get the cumulative salaries to date. Okay? When say to date, as of year 2. Okay? So, kumbaga updated niya. Pila man ang cumulative salaries dapat at the end of year 2. So, since we have 3 vesting periods or 3 years na vesting period, so 3 years siya, no? And then we are on the second year. So, dapat ato ang gamiton na fraction is, or the ratio should be 2/3. Because we are already on the second year of the 3 vesting period. So, total value of compensation times 2/3, this one, this is your cumulative salaries expense as of year 2. So, from this, i-minus lang nato ang cumulative expense, cumulative compensation in the previous year. So, our previous year is just 1 year. So, kato lang iyahang cumulative salaries expense on year 1. Kani siya. So, kani, i-minus nato siya sa cumulative salaries expense sa year 2 for us to get the salaries expense for the current year 2. Okay? Last but not the least, for year 3, okay, so the same process. After getting the total compensation, total value of the compensation, so pwede na mo dili mag-multiply of 3/3 since this is already the last day. So meaning, katong final nga total value of compensation niya mo na to ang cumulative salaries expense at the end of year 3. So after this, the cumulative salaries expense at the end of year 3, i-minus lang nato ang cumulative salaries in the previous year. So, previous years nato kay year 1 and year 2. So, kani siya. Kani. So, i-minus, ibutang nato siya dire para ma-minus siya sa cumulative salaries expense. So, once deducted, we can now get the current, okay, current year 3 salaries expense. So, this amount, kaning tulo, will be recorded every year. Okay, will be journalized. Since this is the amount of salaries expense, entries will be debit, salaries expense, and credit share options outstanding. Okay, so that will be the entry. So this is our basic formula class, and this will be helpful in our future discussions. Okay, so now let's have the illustration. Okay, so before that, as I've mentioned earlier, we have 3-year na vesting period. So since nasa vesting period, we shall not recognize immediately the compensation. Instead, this will be amortized over the vesting period. So, gitagi-tagi na to siya over the vesting period. Now, when there is no vesting period, what will happen? So, the amount of, or the total value of the compensation shall be recorded or shall be recognized immediately. Okay? So, immediately na siya. So, wala na ipag-defer. Immediately on the date of grant, that will be the period kung kano saan nato siya i-recognize as compensation expense. Like in this illustration, for example, no vesting period. On January 1, 2019, share options are granted to employees to purchase 100,000 ordinary shares of 50 par value at 60 per share. On this date, the fair value of each share options is 20. So there are 3 values here given: the par value, the per share value, the option, the exercise price, which is 60 pesos, and the 20 pesos na fair value. So among the 3 values here, the one that we'll be using when measuring the option is the 20 pesos. Mo na siya ato ang measurement sa compensation for the option. So what will happen to the 50 and 60? So later on, upon exercising the share options, magamit nato ni sila. This one, this is the par value of which we can get how much will be the share premium on the exercise of the share options. And then 60 will be used as the amount kung pila ato ang ma-receive when the options are exercised. So the options are exercisable immediately. The employees exercise all their share options on December 31, 2019. Now take note, the options are exercisable immediately. So meaning there is no vesting period. No need na nga maghulat ang mga employees. Immediately, they could be able to exercise their options. So in that case, again, the total value of the compensation shall be recognized immediately as an expense. So entry na to, debit, salaries, share options. So this entry or this account will be the expense, okay, the expense account, and credit the share options outstanding. So this is an equity account, equity instrument nga account. So 2 million. So how did we get the 2 million? The number of options granted times the fair value of the options nga 20. So that is 2 million. This is the entry on January 1, 2019. Now, subsequently, on the same date at year end, December 31, 2019, the employees exercised all their share options. So, unsa may mga kuan nato karon. So, when exercising the options, the accounting will just be the same on a regular basis nga mag-issue ta og shares. We will get the value of the shares, and if the value of the shares exceeds the par value, then there will be share premium. So how much will be the value of the shares nga i-issue nato? So that includes the option price, the exercise price of the option, plus the fair value of the option. So pila man ang exercise price? 60 per share. So 60 times 100,000, that is 6 million. Okay? So the amount paid by the employees is 60 pesos per share. So 100,000 shares nga i-issue times 60, that is 6 million, plus the share options outstanding. So as we've recorded on January 1, 2 million siya. Okay? So i-close nato ning 2 million. So we debited share options outstanding at 2 million. Then we also debit the amount received in the exercise of the share options, 6 million. So these two, as we add this one, this is 8 million. So 8 million is the total value of the shares to be issued. And among the 8 million, 5 million ana kay par value. Nganong par value man? Nganong 5 million man ni siya? Since the par value per share is 50 times 100 shares nga i-issue, so that is 5 million. So excess of the total value of the shares nga 8 million over the par value nga 5 million is 3 million. That is the share premium. So entry na to, debit cash, debit share options outstanding, credit ordinary share capital at par value, and credit share premium. So this is how you record the exercise of the share options. Next illustration is with vesting period. So different from our previous illustration. In our previous illustration, we recognize immediately the total value of the compensation. Wala na nato siya gi-defer. But if there is a vesting period, again, the compensation will be deferred and it will be amortized over the vesting period. Okay. So say for example, on January 1, 2019, the share options are granted to employees to purchase 100,000 ordinary shares of 50 pesos par value at 60 per share. On this date, the fair value of each share option is 15. The officers are entitled to the share options only after completing 2 years of service. So there is a vesting period. The options can be exercised starting January 1, 2021. That is a day after the 2-year period or the 2-year vesting period, and expire 1 year after. All shares or all share options are exercised on December 31, 2021. So now let's compute let's measure the compensation in relation to the share-based compensation. So total compensation or the fair value of the share option is 100,000 share options times 15. That is the fair value of the share options on the date of grant. So we have 1.5 million. So this 1.5 million is already uniform for the 2 vesting period. Why? It is because wala may changes sa number of share options. If you notice sa katong basic formula nato, diba naga-change ang total compensation from time to time. It is because there's also a change in the number of share options. But in this case, uniform lang siya, wala nag-change ang iyahang number of options for the 2-year vesting period. So as is lang siya, 1.5 million. So, uniform na po nato siya pag-distribute over the 2 vesting period. So, 1.5 million divided by 2 years, our annual compensation is 750,000. So, every year we will recognize as compensation this one, 750,000. For 2019, December 31, debit latag salaries, share options, and credit share options outstanding, 750,000. And the same thing also for 2020, the second year of the 2-year vesting period, the same entry, debit, salaries, share options, credit, share options outstanding at 750,000. Now, one question is that the grant date is January 1, 2019. So what will happen on January 1, 2019 on the grant date? Why is it there is no entry seen here sa ato ang solution? Because on the grant date, there is no entry to be recorded. There is no journal entry to be recorded. What are you going to do if there is a grant or if na-finalize na ang grant? On the grant date, you don't have to record entries. Instead, memorandum entry lang ang ibutang. So, wala siya kanang formal journal entry. Instead, only memorandum entry lang ang imuhang i-record. There is no accounting effect on the date of grant. Again, reminder, on the grant date class, there is no accounting effect since there is no formal journal entry will be recorded. That will be recorded. Only memorandum entry lang. Okay. Now, subsequent to the 2-year vesting period, all share options are exercised on December 31, 2021. So, entry lang ta debit cash for the total exercise price of the options. So, 100 options times or 100,000 options times 60 per share. So, 6 million. And then the total share options outstanding exercised, 1.5 million debit for a total of 7,500, right? And then credit ordinary share capital for the par value, that is 100,000 times 50. We have 5 million. And the excess will be credited to share premium. Okay, so that's it. So that is for the with vesting period. Another illustration kani siya with vesting period also, but there is a change in the estimate as to the number of share options to be distributed. So on January 1, 2019, an entity granted 100 share options each to 500 employees. So on the date of grant, there is 500 employees and each employee will receive 100 share options. conditional upon the employees remaining in the entities employed during the vesting period. So, ang condition is kung makalampas pa sila sa vesting period. If mahawa na sila within sa vesting period, then of course, they're no longer entitled with the share options. The share options vest at the end of a 3-year period. So, the vesting period is 3 years. On grant date, each share option has a fair value of 30. So, this 30 will be used later on to measure the share options or to measure the compensation. By December 31, 2019, 30 employees have left, and it is expected that on the basis of a weighted average probability, a further 30 employees will leave during the vesting period. On the following year, 28 employees have left, and the entity expects that a further 25 employees will leave during 2021. And for the last year of the vesting period, 22 employees have left, and therefore 420 employees shall receive share options at the end of 2021. So now let's solve this problem. So first, we are going to compute for the compensation expense for the first year of the vesting period. So again, we base this one on the basic formula that I have shown to you in the previous slide. So on 2019, number of employees, of course, initially naatay 500. But the end of 2019, naay 30 kabuok nga ning hawa. And also, naputay expected nga 30 na mohawa in the future. So, ang estimated na number of employees nato that will be entitled for the share options after the vesting period is 440 na lang. So, times 100 share options per employee. So, the estimated total share options to be distributed at the end of the vesting period is 44,000. Multiplied by the fair value at the date of grant nga 30. So, the total compensation nato for the 3-year vesting period is 1,320,000. So, kaon na to ang first year ani. So, first year ani, divide by 3. So, year 1 or on 2019, ang atong compensation is 440,000. So, our entry on this one is debit salaries expense, share options, 440,000, and credit share options outstanding, 440,000. On the second year, to continue, this is how we compute. We'll start with the number of initial employees, 500. And of course, tanggalo na natutong ning hawa sa 2019. We have 30 employees left. For 2020 na ay 28 kabuok nga ning hawa. And in the future na po, na po expected nga mo hawa. So we have 25. So our estimated employees who are entitled to receive share options at the end of the vesting period is 417,000 times 100 share options. So we have total share options is 41,700 times the fair value of the options at the date of grant. Take note, wala nag-change yun ang ato ang measurement for the options. Still, the fair value of the options at the date of grant, 30. So we have estimated total compensation at the end of course, at the end of the vesting period, nga 1,251,000. And since kani siya nga compensation is estimated ni siya at the end of the year 3 nga vesting period, and still we are on the second year of the vesting period, so kwaon lang nato ang 2/3 ani. So ang 2/3 ani is 834,000. That is 1,251,000 divided by 3 years times 2 years. So this one. This is the cumulative salaries expense as of year 2, December 31, 2020. I-minus lang nato to ato ang previously recognized na compensation expense nga 440,000 sa year 2019. So the current compensation expense for year 2020 is 394,000. So this is the amount to be recognized. So entry, debit, salaries expense, share options at 394,000, credit share options outstanding also at 394,000. And for the last year, the same process. The initial employees is 500. Employees who left in 2019 is 30. For 2020 is 28. For 2021, 22. So, i-minus natin na sila tanan. Ang nabili na lang yun at the end of the vesting period is 420 employees. Multiply by the number of share options per employee. So, we have total share options, 42,000. Times 30 nga fair value, the total compensation at the end of the vesting period nga 3 years is 1,260,000. So, this is sa sulod sa tulo ka tuig. And since we have already recognized for the past 2 years a total compensation of 834,000, so ang amount na lang nga ato ang i-recognize for the year 3 or 2021 is only 426,000. So, mo ni atong i-recognize as compensation expense. So, entry, debit, salaries expense, share options, 426,000, and credit, share options outstanding at 426,000. Okay? So, mo na siya. So, if you'll be asked how much will be the share options outstanding at the end of 2021, of course, that is 1,260,000. I-add lang nimo tong gi-recognize sa 2019, 2020 at saka 2021. So, that is 1,260,000. Okay. So, next illustration will be with conditions and the share options vary. Okay, so naga po siya condition, no? And then the number of options to be given will vary. So, in our previous illustration, as is naman to, no? For within the vesting period, say for example 3 years, 100 lang yun ang ihatag per employee. But in this case, naa siya ilahi nga bracket on how many options will be entitled for each employee. So let's have the problem. On January 1, 2019, an entity granted share options to each of the 300 employees working in the sales department. The shares or the share options vest at the end of a 3-year period, provided that the employees remain in the entity's employ and provided the volume of sales will increase by an average of 10% per year. So the conditions are, first, kailangan ang employee nagapon siya at the end sa vesting period nga 3 years. So nasa vesting period nga 3 years, and dapat ang employee magstay lang gapon siya within the vesting period. And also provided that within the vesting period makaabot siya og an average increase in their sales na 10% per year. So the fair value of each share option on the date of grant is 20. Now, if the sales increase by an average of 10%, so mo na ang isa sa mga requirement, no? Kung makaabot sila ng requirement na average increase nga 10% per year, each employee will receive 200 share options. If the sales increase by an average of 15% per year, so ning saka siya, nahimo siyang 15%, each employee will receive 300 share options. So, kung 10% lang, 200. Pero kung maabot o 15% nga average increase, mas modako pa ilahang share options. Now, during 2019, the sales increased by 10% and the entity expects this rate of increase to continue in the next 2 years. During 2020, the sales increased by 20%, resulting in an average of 15%. Okay, take note ha, wala ta nag-base sa 20% as the basis of the increase, but instead on the average. Okay, pag may tag-average, i-add lang to mga previous increase and divide by the number of years. So if year 2019, 10% I mean, and sa second year, 20%, so total increase is 30%, and the average is 15% for the first 2 years. During 2021, on the third year, the sales increased by an average of 16% over 3 years. Okay, so nag-average na siya og 16%. Sa year 2, 15% yung average. Sa year 1, 10%. So sa year 1, when we compute the compensation, we will base on the 10%. So meaning 200 ka share options atong ihatag. And starting sa second year, 15% naman ta. So 300 share options. And magpadayon siya sa year 2021 kay ning lampas magyapon siya sa 15%. By the end of 2021, 20 employees left the entity. So ang na-determine lang nga naay nang nihawa is on the last year of the vesting period, of which 20 employees left the entity. So now let's have the computation. For the first year, 2019, so we have 300 number of employees, so 300 kabuok, multiply by the share options per employee. So again, ang increase lang sa 2019 is 10%, so 200 lang per employee. So total share options estimated is 60,000 times the 20 nga fair value of the options at the date of grant. So the total compensation, or the estimated total compensation for the vesting period, at the end of the vesting period, is 1.2 million. Okay? Mo ni siya ang estimated total compensation at the end of the vesting period. Now, since we are still on the first year, kuhaon lang nato ang first year ani niya. So, we will just divide it by 3. So, 1.2 million divided by 3, that is 400,000. So, this is our compensation for the year 2019. So, entry, debit, salaries expense, share options, and credit share options outstanding, 400,000. Next year, 2020. So, sa 2020, niabot na 15% ilang average increase. So, they are no longer entitled with 200 share options. Instead, they will be entitled into 300 share options per employee. So, 300 ka number of employees times 300 ka-options per employee. So, the total estimated share options to be given at the end of the vesting period is 90,000 options. Multiply by 20. So, our total estimated compensation at the end of the vesting period is 1,080,000. And since we are still on the second year, kwaon lang nato tong cumulative compensation as of the second year. So, 1/8 times 2/3. So, ang 2/3 ani niya is 1,200,000. So, this 1,200,000 already includes the first year compensation, right? But since ang ato lang pangitaon karon, or ato lang i-recognize for the 2020 is only the current compensation for 2020. So, atong buhaton, i-minus na ito tong previously recognized nga compensation, and that is 400,000, the amount recognized on year 2019. So, ang amount natong i-recognize as compensation expense in the year 2020 is 800,000. So, entry ani, debit, salaries expense, share options, and credit share options outstanding, 800,000. And for the last year, as we determined, there are 20 employees who left in 2020. So, ang number of employees lang entitled for the option is 280. Giminus lang nato ang 20. Then multiply by the number of share options per employee, and still, ang average increase sa 2021 is nilampas siya sa 15%. So meaning, each employee will be entitled for a 300 share options. So total share options nga ihatag at the end of the vesting period is 84,000 times 20. So the total compensation at the end of the vesting period is 1,680,000. And since nanata sa third year, mo na ni siya. So mo na ni ang cumulative na compensation expense as of the third year or as of the day vesting period. Now, to get the amount to be recognized in the 2021 alone, i-minus lang nato tong previously recognized compensation, and that is 1,200,000, both na sa year 2019 and 2020. On the year 2019, we recognized 400,000, and on the year 2020, we recognized compensation of 800,000 for a total of 1,200,000. So the amount to be recognized as compensation expense in the year 2021 is 480,000. So entry on this one is debit, salaries expense, share options, and credit share options outstanding at 480,000. So, ingunan na lang class. Okay, so kani siya, comprehensive illustration, comparison lang if the options are vested immediately, and the second case is when there is a vesting period, like say for example, the options will be vested over the 3-year period. So the amount of or the number of share options to be distributed at the date of grant is 100 share options times 500 employees. How much is that? I think that is 50,000 options. No. So case number 1, assume that the share options vest immediately. So how much will be the amount to be reported or recognized as compensation expense at the date of grant? That will be 50,000 times 4. Kay 4 man ang fair value sa share options. So that would be 2 million. Okay, so 2 million or no. 200,000. Okay, 200,000 siya. So entry ani debit nasa next slide. Okay, salaries expense, credit, share options outstanding at 200,000. So, simple lang no, basta vested immediately. What if nasa vesting period? Assuming that by the period of 2019, 30 employees have left, and based on a weighted average probability, a further 20 employees will leave during the vesting period. By the end of 2020, only 7 employees have left, and a further 10 will leave during 2021. And at the end of 2021, 15 employees left the company. So now let's see. Okay, prior to this entry, tanaw sa nato giun sa niya pag-compute. So for the year 2019, number of share options 100 multiplied by the number of employees. So how did we get 450? So dara, we have 500 initial employees, and then 30 employees na ang ninghawa as of 2019, and there will be 20 employees who are expected to leave in the future. So 450 na lang. So 450 times 100, that is 45,000, times 4 pesos na fair value of the option. So the total fair value of the compensation is 180,000. This is the estimated compensation at the end of the vesting period. Since we are in the first year of the vesting period, count lang nato ang 1 year niya over the 3 period. So we have 60,000. So this is the amount to be recognized as salaries expense. For year 2020, 453 na lang ang nabilin. Estimated nga mabilin at the end of the vesting period. That is 500 minus 37. These are the employees who actually left as of year 2020. 30 sa 2019 plus 7 sa 2020. And then there are 10 who are expected to leave. So, ang nabilin na lang is 453. And the total fair value of the compensation is 181,200. Since we are on the second year, times 2/3 ta. So, our cumulative salaries as of 2020 is 120,800 minus the previously recognized na compensation expense for the first year, 60,000. So, ang nabilin kay 60,800. This is the amount of salaries expense during the year. Next is, on the last year, 2021. So, ang nabilin na lang ang mga employees kay 448 because as of that year, there are already 52 employees who left the company. So, ang nabilin na lang is 448. So, the total fair value of the compensation is 179,200. So, this is the estimated compensation at the end of the vesting period. And since we are on the last year na, monasad ni ang cumulative compensation. I-minus lang nato tong previously recognized na compensation expense for the past 2 years. That is 120,800. So, salaries expense for the current year is 58,400. So, kani nga mga amounts, mo ni ato ang i-record. Okay? So, entry. Okay, on the date of grant, there's only a memorandum entry which states that there is a granting of share options to 500 employees with 100 share options. And on December 31, 2019, entry is debit salaries expense, 60,000, and credit share options outstanding, 60,000. For the next year, the same entry, differ lang ang amount, 60,800 and 60,800. And for the last year, 58,400 and 58,400. Okay. Now, we are going to use the intrinsic value method. Again, intrinsic value is the alternative way of measuring the share-based compensation for a share option if in case that the fair value of the share options on the date of grant is not given or cannot be estimated reliably. So, how do we know the intrinsic value of the options? So, again, the intrinsic value is used when the fair value of the options cannot be estimated reliably. So, saan man nato pag-compute sa intrinsic value? The intrinsic value is the excess of the market value of the share over the option price. So, again, compare the market value and the option price. When I say option price, that is the exercise price of the option. At the times kay exercise na nimo option, pila may mabayaran nimo. That is the exercise price. Intrinsic value is the difference between the market value of the shares over the exercise price. Okay. So, on January 1, 2019, an entity granted 10,000 share options to employees. The share options vest on December 31, 2020, provided that the employees remain in service until then. The fair value of the share option cannot be estimated reliably, so therefore we'll be using the intrinsic value. The par value per ordinary share is 100. The option price is 125 or the exercise price is 125, and the market value of the ordinary share is also 125 at the date of grant. All share options vested on December 31, 2020, and no employees left the entity. The share options can be exercised starting January 1, 2021 and expires 2 years after. All share options are exercised on December 31, 2021. The share market prices are 150 on December 31, 2019, 180 on December 39, 2020, and 200 on December 31, 2021. So, again, the grant date is January 1, 2019. So, the vesting period is 2 years, right? So, kailangan nato siya i-defer, amortize lang nato siya over the vesting period. So, pila man natong compensation for the first year, 2019. So, ato sang pangitaon or ato sang i-determine how much is the intrinsic value. So, again, the intrinsic value is the difference between the market value as of the date over the option price. The option price is 125. The market value on December 31, 2019 is 150. So, the difference between the two is 25. So, 25 times 10,000. So, the total compensation over the vesting period is 250,000. And since 2019 pa man ta, so we'll just get the 2019 compensation. So, i-divide natin siya by 2. The amount of compensation to be recognized on the year 2019 is 125,000. So, entry, debit, salaries, share options, 125,000. Credit, share options outstanding, 125,000. That is for the year 2019. Again, take note we use the intrinsic value. And the intrinsic value is the difference between the market value on the date, kano sa ka mag-measure, kano sa ka mag-recognize of compensation, and versus the option price. For the last year of the vesting period, the market value is 180. So, if you notice, naga-change ato ang intrinsic value, kay tungod, naga-change man pod ang market value. So, market value is 180. Option price is 125. Therefore, the intrinsic value for the year 2020 is 55. Times the 10,000 share options, the total compensation is 550,000. So, muna ni ang cumulative compensation expense at the end of the vesting period. Minus lang nato ang compensation nga gi-recognize nato for the year 2019 na 125,000. Therefore, the compensation expense to be recognized for the year 2020 is 425,000. So, debit, salaries, share options, credit, share options outstanding at 425,000. For the year 2021, so on the year 2021, for a while class. Okay, for the year 2021, another na-increase in the intrinsic value. Note that the increase in intrinsic value after the vesting period is recognized as additional compensation. Kana sa ganito gi-exercise ang kuan class, ang iyahang option that is on December 31, 2021. Even though that the vesting period ends on December 31, 2020, meaning mag-stop na dira, diba, ato ang pag-recognize sa compensation. But using the intrinsic value method on the exercise date, on the exercise of the option, when there's a change in the intrinsic value, we need to adjust the compensation or we need to recognize an additional compensation immediately. Okay? So, how much is the increase in the intrinsic value? So, why 20? It is because the market value on the last day of the vesting period, 180, and on December 31, 2021, on the date of exercise, nahimo na siyang 200. So, na-increase in the intrinsic value. Okay. Another way to compute for the intrinsic value, we get the respective intrinsic value of each period. Sa December 31, 2020, di ba, ang iyahang intrinsic value is 55, right? For December 31, 2021, ang iyahang intrinsic value becomes how much? 200, yung market value minus the exercise price nga 125, tama ba? So, ang difference is 75. Tama? So, the intrinsic value on December 31, 2020 is 55, while the intrinsic value on December 31, 2020 is 75. So, there is really an increase in the intrinsic value by 20. So, that increase in the intrinsic value should be recognized as an additional compensation. And that will be recognized immediately. So, 20, pila man ang iyang increase in the compensation? 20 times 10,000 ka share options. The total additional compensation is 200,000. So, this will be recognized immediately. So, entry na to, debit, salaries, share options, 450,000, and credit, share options outstanding. Why is it 425? Let me check, class, ha. Okay, this should not be 425. Again, i-correct lang nato, ha. This must be 200,000. Again, ang entry nato to record the additional compensation is debit, salaries, share option, 200,000, credit, share options outstanding 200,000. Okay? Do you get me? Again, debit, salaries, 200,000, credit, share options outstanding 200,000. So, again, that was the entry needed prior to the recognition of the exercise of the share option. So, kumbaga, gi-adjust sa nato ang share options outstanding. So, after that, we need to recognize, of course, the exercise of the option. After this, after recognizing the additional compensation, how much is our share options outstanding? That was 750. Ano man? On the vesting period, we already have an outstanding share options nga 550,000 plus the additional outstanding share options nga gi-recognize nato nga 200,000. So, total of 750,000. So, mana siya, gi-close lang nato siya, gi-debit nato 750,000. And the amount of the option price or the exercise price of the option is 125 per option times 10,000 shares. So, 10,000 times 125, that is 1,250,000. So, gi-debit nato siya as cash. So, ang total ani is how much? 2 million, right? So, 2 million. Sa 2 million, 1 million ana kay par value. Yun sa nato pag-compute ang 1 million. 100,000 times 100 na par value niya. Tama ba? 100,000. Tama ba ko? 10,000 shares. Right? 10,000 shares lang man, no? Times 100 na par value, that is 1 million. And excess of this amount over the par value, that will be credited to share premium. Again, nag-debit ta og cash for the exercise price in the total amount of 1,250,000. Debit also, or i-close na to ang share options outstanding, 750,000. Credit, ordinary share, capital at par value, 1 million. And credit share premium, 1 million also. Okay. So, last but not the least is the acceleration of vesting. What do you mean by acceleration of vesting? Say, for example, if there is a vesting period, so, unsay pasabot sa vesting period, we need to wait for the vesting period to end before the entitlement to pursue. But when we say acceleration of vesting, we are no longer need to wait the vesting period. Instead, on that date kuan siya, gi-accelerate siya, i-vest na siya immediately. Okay, so kumbaga i-accelerate nato ang vesting, no need na nga hulaton ang vesting period, ang end sa vesting period before ta mo entitle sa katong share-based compensation. So, PFRS 2, paragraph 28 provides that if an entity cancels or settles a grant of share options during the vesting period, the entity shall account for the cancellation or settlement as an acceleration of vesting. So again, kanus alang man ta mag-accelerate sa vesting when there is either cancellation or settlement of the grant of share option. Cancellation meaning during the vesting period, with notice para sa ato ang mga employees, gi-cancel nato, gi-void nato ang katong granting of the share options, or if not cancellation, gi-settle nato in advance. Wala na nato gihulat ang vesting period nga mahuman, gi-settle na nato siya diretsyo. So, if that's the case, then this cancellation and settlement shall be accounted as acceleration of vesting. So, unsa may mahitabo pag na-acceleration of vesting? The entity shall recognize immediately the compensation expense that otherwise would have been recognized for services rendered over the remainder of the vesting period. In short, pag naapay mga nabili nga wala pa pag naapay mga nabili na compensation na wala pa na-recognize as of the date of cancellation or settlement, i-recognize na siya immediately. For example, if the vesting period is 3 years and then napaka sa second year niya sa vesting period, of course, napay 1 year nga wala pa na-recognize nga compensation. So, if on the second year, nag-decide ka nga i-settle nimo ang grant sa option, then ang katong nahibilin na 1 year nga wala pa na-recognize shall be recognized immediately as compensation expense. So tanang mga future nga ipang-recognize nimo nga compensation, i-recognize na nimo siya immediately. Any payment made to the employee on the cancellation or settlement of the grant shall be accounted for as a repurchase of equity interest, meaning a deduction from equity. If the payment exceeds the fair value of the share option, the excess shall be recognized as expense. Okay, so let's have this one. On January 1, 2019, an entity granted 50,000 share options to the employees. The option price is 60 pesos and the par value of the share is 50. The vesting period is 4 years. The fair value of the share options or the total compensation expense to the vesting date on December 31, 2022 has been calculated at 4 million. So, gi-compute na niya ang total compensation for over the 4-year nga vesting period. So, that is 4 million. Okay, so if 4 million ang iyang total compensation, how much is the fair value of the option? Okay, kanang 4 million, that is good for the 50,000 shares. So 4 million divided by 50,000 shares. Okay, we'll compute. 4 million divide 50,000 shares. So, kumbaga 80. Nasa 80 ang iyahang option price. Fair value of the option. The entity has decided to settle the award early on December 31, 2021. So, meaning, na siya, kanang prior siya sa end sa iyang vesting period. Kang mag-end man iyahang vesting period sa December 31, 2022. Pero prior to that, on December 31, 2021, nag-decide ang entity nga i-settle na lang siya. Now, the compensation expense charged in the income statement since the date of the grant on January 1, 2019 is as follows. So, on the year 2019, 1 million. On the year 2020, 1,050,000. If the share options are canceled or settled during the vesting period, it is as if the vesting date had been brought forward and the balance of the fair value not yet expensed is recognized immediately. So, ang atong buhatan ani is we need to determine pila na lang ang wala pa na recognized as compensation. So, if the total compensation for the 4-year vesting period is 4 million, and as of the second year, 2,050,000 na atong na-recognize, then ang atoang wala pa na-recognized is 1,950,000. So, what will happen? So, this 1,950,000 nga wala pa na ito nga recognize, i-recognize na ni siya immediately as of the date of settlement. So, entry na to, debit, salaries expense, 1,950,000, and credit, share options outstanding at 1,950,000. So, as simple as that, class. If the share options are exercised on December 31, 2021, okay, assuming on that date sa pag-settle, gi-exercise siya. So, entry would be debit cash, 50,000 shares times 60 nga option price, katong yung exercise price. We have 3 million. Plus the share options outstanding. Diba, the 4 million nga total compensation, gi-recognize na siya, tanan, as of December 31, 2021. So, debit taan niya 4 million. And credit share capital for the par value, 50,000 times 50. So, we have 2.5 million. And the remainder will be credited to share premium at 4.5 million. So, this is our entry if the share options are exercised. So that ends our lecture for this topic. So, if you have other queries or if you have other clarification, you may also refer to the following sources. And if you have questions, class, you may ask also me for clarification. So, I hope that you have enjoyed this video and you have learned a lot from my lecture, and I'll see you on my next video, which is all about cash settled share-based compensation, specifically share appreciation rights. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time, class. God bless you all. Thank you.